Alrighty, we are live. Alright, my name is Levi and welcome back to Commanding the Zones. It's a small little feature. Today we're going to be doing a deck tech on Omnath, Locus of Mana. Alrighty, so, one of the things I like to try to do with my stream is I like to try to make sure that we are playing decks that I consider tier 1. Most of my stream and the decks I'll feature on this YouTube channel as well are going to be top tier decks within the multiplayer and French one-on-one lists. Right now we're going to go ahead and feature Omnath, Locus of Mana. He is a mono green general, and for the longest time a lot of people thought he was comparable to another mono green general named Azusa. And I'll go ahead and pull that one up for you real fast. Azusa, Lost but Seeking. Here she is. She is 3 mana, so the exact same cost as Omnath. And she's a legendary creature, human monk, which it's not really too relevant to the deck that she gets run in. And then she's a 1/2 that allows you to play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. Whereas Mr. Omnath down here is a 3 mana for a 1/1 that green mana doesn't do for your mana pool whenever your steps and phases end. And then he gets +1/+1 for each green mana in your mana pool. Something I have to reiterate just really quickly, and I'm sure a lot of you people already know this, but his +1/+1 is a static ability. It's not like it's +1/+1 counters or anything else. He just gets that equal to the mana pool, so that's something to keep in mind. I've had players before to keep track of it with dice in real life, and they end up thinking it's a +1/+1 counter and try to do some weird shenanigans with it. Although those are usually newer players to the format and don't quite understand how a card functions. Alrighty, well, moving on. The reason Omnath is better than Azusa is that Azusa is really good, but the problem is she needs to keep drawing gas in order to work, and she wants the majority of her deck to be heavy on lands. Omnath, on the other hand, is kind of opposite of that. He likes to have medium to low land count and have lots of little mana producing dorks that'll do a lot for him. So we're going to go ahead and go all the way up to the top of my list here, just to show you we have 99 in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard. This is the way we do it in Cockatrice, as well as Moto. Whenever you're playing on Moto, Moto will be the same way. You always put your general in the sideboard. Alright, starting off, we're going to be over here in the artifacts. Lightning Greaves is actually quite a staple in EDH. When the format was fairly brand new, and this is talking back 5-6 years ago, Lightning Greaves was pretty much in every single deck, whether or not the deck could actually utilize it to an extent that it was worth running. Lightning Greaves also got a printed brother, I shouldn't say brother, but fairly close, in Swiftfoot Boots, which I'm not running in this deck, but that's just because I think I did run it originally in this deck and then it got cut, mainly because Shroud is overall better than Hexproof in some cases, and I will talk about that here in a second. But the deck list itself wants the 0 equip. It's just strictly better than having to pay 1 for basically the exact same effect. Alright, so the next card we're running is Lotus Petal. Lotus Petal is a 0 costing artifact that comes into play. You can tap sack it to add 1 mana of any color or mana to your mana pool. This ability is actually very strong, and you'll notice a lot of high-up lists in multiplayer will run it. The French list actually, I can't remember, I don't think this card's banned, but I do know that they do not run this as much. In fact, I want to say it's not banned. I don't think it's banned in French, but this card is very good in the sense that it allows you to do some crazy things on turn 1. For example, in this deck, we also run Soul Ring, which is, quite a staple in the format regardless, mainly only for multiplayer because it is banned in French one-on-one, but it is 1 mana, taps for 2 colorless, pretty much broken staple of the format. And one of these days I'll go over cards I think that shouldn't be banned, but definitely would open up space in a lot of decks, because cards that are such staples like this, I think, limit creativity when it comes to deck building. Alright, so anyhow, Lotus Petal and Soul Ring are kind of nice, because if you run them together, there's a couple God Hands in this deck, a couple different scenarios you can do, but We'll come back and talk to those, I guess, but we'll go ahead and keep going through our list. Alright, so our next one we have is Skull Clamp. It's another really good and broken card. This card was actually so broken it ended up getting banned, I think, within the first month of it being printed. Skull Clamp is 1 mana for a 1 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1, -1. Whenever equipped creature is put into a graveyard, you draw 2 cards. Equip cost is 1. This card is broken because back in the standard play that this came out in was the Mirrored and Onslaught, so you had Onslaught Goblins and Onslaught Elves that just took advantage of Skull Clamp like it was going out of style. It was ridiculous. I actually remember playing against a couple decks while this was still standard legal, and it was absolutely insane, and it still holds true even today. I mean, like, if you've played EDH any amount, you've seen people run Skull Clamp. It's that good. And the last but not least is Umezawa's Jite. This may seem like an odd include for this deck, considering what the deck's goal generally is to get out a giant Omnath and then punch through with Omnath. And this slot originally, for me anyhow, was a Rancor. Rancor was originally ran in the slot, and I can show you what that does really fast. Rancor is a really popular enchantment, printed, I can't remember when it was originally printed. I want to say it was Urza's something or another. It was printed in. It looks like Urza's Legacy, if I know that's the right symbol from reading that abbreviation right. Anyhow, it's 1 green mana for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. Whenever it's put into the graveyard, you return Rancor to your hand. Rancor's really good. It allows Omnath a way to actually get his general damage through. But recently I added in Umezawa's Jite, and Jite has actually been really nice for dealing with a lot of problem creatures in the format. Jite is a 2 mana artifact, legendary artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage, you put 2 charge counters on it. It's kind of neat because that combat damage doesn't have to be to a player, it can be to another creature. Just as long as it's combat damage, it gets the 2 counters. And then the 2 counters are the reason why, I mean, this is really why Umezawa's Jite is broken, it's just the versatility it provides. You can remove a counter from it to give the equipped creature +2/+2, or you can give target creature -1/-1, or you can gain 2 life. Sorry there, I had to get a drink. Umezawa's Jite, just overall really good. I mean, you can use it as removal, you can use it as a pump, or if it's about to die, or if you really need the life, you can gain life off of it. Very, very strong card. Alrighty, so that's our 5 artifacts we run in the whole entire deck. Next we're going to move on to our creatures, which we are fairly heavy on creatures. We run 30 in total. First up is Acidic Slime. Acidic Slime is again a staple in the deck, or a staple in the format I should say, because of everything that it does. It's versatility is kind of the name of the game in EDH. Getting the most out of your cards. One could say that card advantage in the sense of 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s and so on and so on and so on are actually better, but honestly the straight up value of a single card and its versatility are what allows you to play the long game in EDH. So Acidic Slime is one of these cards, 5 mana for a 2/2 Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, you destroy an artifact, enchantment, or land. I kind of really wish this read, when he enters the battlefield, he destroys an online permanent, so he could hit planeswalkers. But that isn't true, or that isn't so. But even as is, he's still really good. I mean, he's gonna kill something, and then he has potential to sit back either as a blocker or get him into the red zone because you know he's gonna push his damage through, being a Death Toucher. So he's really, really decent. Arbor Elf. We run a suite of 1 mana dorks that, when I say mana dorks, what that term is generally used for a 1 mana artifact, or 1 mana creature that usually taps to add mana or taps to untap lands. Arbor Elf is untapping a forest in this deck. We run quite a bit of forest, so he literally is just tapped to add a green essentially. Birds of Paradise is normally ran in multicolor decks, but in this deck we use it as just a mana dork. It's just going to be tapping for green, so it's again 1 mana for a 0/1 that taps for mana. Dryad Arbor is kind of a mana dork, and there's a cool interaction with Dryad Arbor that actually sees play in Modern a lot right now, which is use a card that we also have in the deck that we'll talk about later, but it's called Green Sun Zenith, and you can essentially pay 1 green mana to search this card out, put it into play, so it becomes a 1 mana ramp spell in the sense that it's 1 mana, put a forest into play. Untapped, by the way, which is really good. Not that Dryad Arbor can tap that same turn, because it is a creature, so it will have summoning sickness. But Dryad Arbor, incredibly great card. Just nicely designed. Dungrove Elder. This card is actually a card I've been kind of considering about cutting. But every single time I want to cut him, he kind of does something amazing for me, so I've yet to get rid of him. He is a 3 mana star hexproof. His power and toughness are each equal to the number of forest you control. So right off the bat, he is almost always going to be at the very least a 3/3. And that's if you didn't power him out somehow. Generally speaking, he's fairly large. When he comes down, he's always such a threat, and they pretty much have to expend a wrath effect to get rid of him. So overall, he's been very good in this deck. There's still a part of me, though, that wants to cut him. He does seem subpar. I mean, he really doesn't do anything when he first hits the board besides be a big scary thing and baits out a wrath, but even then, it's like Omnath kind of does the same thing. So he's kind of on the chopping block. Like, if something comes out that's better for him, and as I'm recording this, M15 and Warlords of Takir have not come out yet. So if something better comes out in those, I'll probably be replacing Dungrove Elder. Or if you guys have suggestions, leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to look at them. Elvish Mystic is going to be a 1 green mana dork. Again, just kind of taps for green. Not much exciting going on there. Elvish Spirit Guide. This is kind of going with our Lotus Petal type theme. Elvish Spirit Guide is 3 mana for a 2/2. I believe it's an elf spirit. Or yes, it is an elf spirit. The important thing here is what its ability is. You'll actually never cast this card as a 3/2/2 flyer, or it isn't even flying, so just as a 3/2/2, you'd never cast this. What you do instead is you exile it from your hand to add a green to your mana pool. Between this card, the Lotus Petal, and the Soul Ring allow you to have either a turn 2 or a turn 1 Omnath. Since Omnath is a colorless and 2 green, going back to him real quick, one of the plays I like to do in this deck is go land, like the God Hand would be essentially a land, Soul Ring, and then either Lotus Petal or Elvish Spirit Guide. So you could go land, Soul Ring, tap the Soul Ring, exile the Spirit Guide from your hand. It would give you 1 green mana. Then you can go ahead and cast Omnath out on turn 1. Not saying that turn 1 Omnath is amazing. In fact, generally it's not as good, but your opponents also won't have a ton of 1 mana removal unless they're playing white. Or if they're playing Lightning Bolt in red, which can surprisingly happen. So, like I said, though, Lotus Petal and Elvish Spirit Guide are great just for getting out early Omnaths or powering out something else fairly fast. Okay, here we go, on to Eternal Witness. This is, again, another staple in the format. She's, basically she's Regrowth of the Body. If you're an older player, you know what Regrowth does. Regrowth is a colorless and a green for a sorcery. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. In fact, I'll go ahead and pull it up for you real fast. Regrowth. This is the original Regrowth. It's the beautiful little art there of the little tree growing. Sunlight. It's happy. Nice little warm sunlight there. And she's pretty much doing the same thing. She'll be grabbing you. Oh, look at that. She's got sunlight happening behind her. I guess I never really made those parallels, if that is a parallel. Beautiful piece of Therese Nielsen art too, by the way. But yeah, great card. Just a complete staple in the format. Regrowth of the Body. Fauna Shaman. Fauna Shaman is a great card. This is essentially Survival of the Fittest, which is a broken legacy card, in so much that it got banned. But even before it got banned, it was still an amazing card. It's 2 mana, colorless and a green. Fauna Shaman, though, is pay a green, tap it, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it to your hand, then shuffle your library on a 2/2 body. An important thing to mention, too, is most of my mana dorks, Birds of Paradise barring, are all elves, and this comes into play a little bit further down. I'll show you. But she's a great card on her own. Just great utility, allows you to grab answers to, whenever you need them. Finhorn Elves, again, just another green mana dork, again an elf, which is important to keep in mind. Next we have Jorga Treespeaker, and I know some people who are unfamiliar with the EDH format don't quite get why she gets run. And the reason she gets ran is because she is what we call the green soul ring. For 1 green mana, she comes down. If she was to do it turn 1, she comes down turn 1 as just a 1/1, which is nothing special. But turn 2, you throw down your second land, you tap your 2 lands and level her up once, and now she's tapping for 2. So you essentially didn't miss a land drop, and she's accelerating you just as fast. So she is, I shouldn't say literally, but as close as you can get to a Soul Ring reprint, even though she basically only works in mono green. That's not true. She can work in anything that splashes green, but great card. Like, I think she's highly underrated and doesn't see enough play in EDH. She should see more. Next one is our Eldrazi, Kozilek Butcher of Truth. And I'm actually testing him out currently. Usually the slot goes to Ulamog, but another streamer by the name of Brian Weissman, who I looked at, I basically used his list as a basis with my list to kind of combine and make these lists, and he was running Kozilek over Ulamog. And I can assume the draw 4 is a little more relevant because we are in green, and green doesn't have the greatest draw cards. The one thing I have to say in as the merit to Ulamog, though, and I'll pull him up, is that Ulamog is indestructible and also destroys a permanent when it comes into play. So he's colorless removal, which is great in this format, and he's also indestructible, so he doesn't go away with Wraths or anything else, whereas sadly my little friend Kozilek does. And we could run both of them, and like, in fact, that even might be a thing if I get rid of Dungrove Elder in the deck. But I'd like to kind of replace him, I think, with more of a utility creature, because you can never really go wrong with utility, especially when we have such a toolbox with Fauna Shaman and our Survival of the Fittest that we have further down. Alright, so the next card we have is Llanowar Elves. Again, another 1-for-1 mana dork that's also an elf. Probably one of the standard, if not the first, mana elf. Oracle of Mundai. This is another great staple of the format. She sees play in a lot of decks. And I think people don't really get why they run her. I think a lot of people think, oh, we run her because she's acceleration. That's technically true, but the real reason you run her is that she helps get lands off the top of your deck so you can draw gas. That's essentially why she's good. It's not so much that she can accelerate you out faster because of her 2 land drops a turn. It's really because it allows you to get lands off the top of your deck so you're not drawing those lands. Or hopefully not drawing those lands. But she's great in here, and she's also an elf, which does matter for our very next card. Now these are the reason why we run so many little mana dorks. We have Priest of Titania. Priest of Titania is a 2 mana for a 1/1 elf that you can tap it to add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each elf in play. Play this ability only as a mana source. This is just incredibly good with the number of elves running. In fact, now that I think about it, I think I would immediately replace Dungrove Elder with I can't remember his name, but there is a 3 mana elf that has the Priest of Titania ability, and he also buffs all elves by giving them +1/+1. So I may have to look into that after this, and I apologize for not remembering his name off the top of my head. Alrighty, so next thing we're going to talk about here is Quirion Ranger. Quirion Ranger, if you're familiar at all with Legacy, or I actually don't know if it ever happened in Modern, but there was a deck called Elf Ball, and the Elf Ball deck essentially is play a lot of elves onto the field and then turn them sideways, essentially, or play a giant spell like Roar of the Crowd or something like that. Just things that deal damage to a lot of creatures in play. Well, the Shoe is one of the key components in the Elf Ball deck because she allows you to untap any of your dudes that tap for high mana by simply returning a forest to your hand. And that's exactly what she does. You return forest to your hand, you can untap a creature. Mainly we'll be using it to either untap one of our utility creatures or to untap one of our mana guys so that we can add more mana to our mana pool with Omnath. Next up we have is Regale Force, or Regal Force, depending on how you say that. I'm pretty bad at pronunciations, as you'll come to find out. Regal Force is going to be a 7 mana 5/5, which seems really steep, but his ability is, as far as I can tell, and from what I've played with, been well enough that it's okay. He is, whenever he comes into play, you draw a card for each green creature you control. Green kind of hurts for draw, so this is actually a really great draw card, and it also has a decent sized body, being a 5/5. So he's not bad. Like, I've seen a lot worse in green. And then Rofellos. Oh, poor Rofellos. Rofellos used to be a commander, and when Rofellos was a commander, he was just as happy as he is in this picture. he would just crush noobs and all kinds of opponents all day, every day. Nowadays, though, he's just kind of taking vacation, sitting as part of the 99, and rightfully so. He was, I shouldn't say probably, he was incredibly broken as a general. Um, Now that he's no longer has the ability to be a general or a commander, whichever one you say, he is now part of the 99, and he's a great addition to the 99. He is 2 green for a 2/1 that has tap, add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each forest you control, which, as you can imagine, is simply tap double the amount of mana you would have normally available to you. He is an elf legend, or legendary elf creature, I should say. Or he's an elf druid, actually. Oh, that's cool. They added the druid subtyping too. But in this deck, he's amazing. He's also an elf, so he counts for all of our elf effects, as well as being tutorable from the Fauna Shaman or the Survivor of the Fittest. Just great card overall. Alright, so the next card we have here is the Sakura Tribe Elder. This is a colorless mana and a green for a 1/1. Sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder, search your library for a basic land card. Put that card in the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. This card is literally rampant growth with a body. And this guy used to be a ton better back when you could put damage on the stack. He's still good now, don't get me wrong. You can still declare a block with him and sack him so that the damage essentially fizzles as long as the creature he's blocking doesn't have trample. So he's still really good. Like, he's also, I should say he's a staple of the format, although I am seeing less and less of him get played. And when I say I see, I only play a lot of Cockatrice and Moto on my during the weekdays, and then I play at my local shops. I frequent about 3 local shops here in Phoenix, and I should say 4, but one I haven't been to in over 2 months, so I don't really frequent them anymore. But 3 shops I frequent and play EDH at, and I've definitely noticed Sakura Tribe Elder's kind of taken a turn for the worst. Not that it's a bad card, it's still a completely great card, and I obviously still run in this deck. Scrib Ranger. This guy, I absolutely love this guy, and I love the look on people's faces when I play this card. Scrib Ranger, 2 mana for a 1/1, flash, flying, protection from blue. Return a forest to your hand, untap target creature, plays ability only once a turn. Wait a minute, we know that effect. That's the Quarian Ranger effect. Yes it is. But for 1 mana more, we get so much more added on. It's almost ridiculous. I mean, this is why we're talking about value on a card. This is value. For 1 more mana, for that 1 colorless mana, we get to get flash, we get to get flying, we get to get protection from blue. 3 amazing effects packed into that 1 colorless mana, since we know that 1 green gives us Quarian Ranger. The only downside to this card is that it's not an elf, but you know what, being a fairy is just fine by me when you have this many upsides. Being able to block a blue creature, most flying things that are going to be big trying to come at your face are going to be blue. Blue or white, I should say, but blue is going to be a majority of them. I mean, this guy is awesome. You can flash him in, you can block a giant blue guy, you can immediately, up his ability to add more mana to your mana pool to make something lethal. Like, he's so good. Give him a try if you're not playing him already in this kind of deck. Alright, next up, Seaborn Muse. First thing I'd like to mention is that if you, Sheldon writes an article for Star City Games, I think it comes out every Wednesday. If you're an avid reader of it, as I am, he talks a lot about different cards, and one of the cards he mentioned in one of his articles was that Seaborn Muse and its, I should say, prettier stepsister, Prophet of Krufix, are fairly broken in what they do. Like he said, honestly, not saying it's gonna happen, and I'm saying to take this with a grain of salt, but if he was to personally have bans, he would definitely get rid of these cards because they create such an unfair advantage. Because they allow you to play on everybody else's turn, not just your own, and they really do. Seaborn Muse was good beforehand, and then Prophet of Krufix just kind of took it out and spiraled out of control. And just to show you guys Prophet of Krufix, you know what I'm talking about. It's oops. Spell right. Prophet of Krufix. Same exact mana cost, so 5, except it's blue-green instead of double-green. And I think the bodies are comparable. I can't remember what the other one is. I'll have to look back at it. But the reason Prophet of Krufix is better is it untaps during each other player's untap step, and then it also allows you to play your creatures though you have flash. Although there is one crucial difference, and I've had to point this out to people before, is that Prophet of Krufix only untaps all of your creatures and lands during each other player's untap step. Doesn't do it for your own. Whereas Seaborn Muse, oh no, it does it for other players too, so it doesn't do it for yours. So you're okay. Huh. Okay, so that's fine. So that's what that does. Alrighty. Next up is another incredibly broken staple in the format, and when I say broken is like when we're talking about value on cards, this is definitely one of them. Not only is it complete value, but because it's colorless, it sees play in almost any deck that can jam it in there. This is actually a player-created card, and I fail to remember the name of the pro player that designed this card, but it is an amazing card. It is 4 mana for a 2/2 artifact creature, Golem. When Solemn Samaculum enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card. You put that land card into play tapped. If you do, shuffle your library. Whenever Solemn Simulacrum is put into a graveyard from play, you may draw a card. This guy is great. He gives colors that need draw. He gives colors that don't have ramp. He gives the colors that already have ramp more ramp. He gives the colors that already have draw more draw. This card is amazing. You'll want to play it. Probably 80% of the decks you build in EDH will run this card. If not more than 80. Like, it might be more than 80. That's just the statistics I pulled out of my head. Alrighty. Steel Hellkite. A really good card. This deck runs it because there are certain things that green can't answer, and that's really the reason why Steel Hellkite really gets run in a lot of decks. He'll get run in a lot of monocolor decks because he basically tries to shore up the weaknesses that those colors can't handle. Like, for instance, red and black cannot handle enchantments. This guy handles enchantments for him. And green has a hard time just straight up killing other creatures. He kills other creatures for him. So he's fairly good. And not to mention, the effect is kind of reminiscent of Pernicious Deed, but doesn't go down. It just hits just for the X instead, so it doesn't really go down. But still a really good card, fairly decently. I mean, it's decent cost. It's 6 for a 5/5 flyer, and then you get a pump ability, which you'll pretty much never use unless you're going to hit for lethal with it. And then the X effect, which is more often used. Terrastodon. Terrastodon is, again, another amazing card in this deck. I wouldn't call it a staple just yet. It used to be. People seem to play with it for a while, then take it out because they feel like they've got better options. Because people really don't like giving their friends elephants. Giving somebody elephants is really good advantage for what this card does. It is an 8 mana for a 9/9. Already you're getting value from itself. Destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. For each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant creature token onto the battlefield. Well, this card is absolutely bonkers, because there are certain things you can do with it if you get it out early game against a player in 1v1. A lot of the times the average, and this is just actually a statistical thing, most average hand sizes will keep 3 lands in their first opening hand. So, barring that they didn't draw any other lands, or even if they did draw, say their next 2 draws are 2 lands, and you Terrastodon, so you're able to turn 3 or 4, cast Terrastodon. There are ways in this deck to definitely do that. You essentially set them back 3 turns. Even giving them the 3 elephants, who cares? I mean, the worst they could do is when you turn Terrastodon sideways, is that they block all 3 elephants that you're Terrastodon, and then neither one of you have creatures, and he's still down those lands. There is no upside for your opponent when you play Terrastodon. Or Terrastodon, however you say that. Alright, next up is Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. This guy is amazing. He is such a powerhouse. A lot of the times when I play him just to see if somebody has removal or wrath to get rid of him. Basically, it's the card. I like to call it my own wrath spell, and the reason being is when I play this guy, he usually provokes a wrath, and he's just so great. And there are times in this deck where you want to make other players wrath the board to handle somebody you're having problems with. And Vorinclex is one of those cards. He's going to force people to deal with him. And there's not very many cards in the format that can... Or I shouldn't say there's not many. There are cards that can do that. But the ones who really do it are the ones that shine. But you also have to really know when to play them. When the appropriate time is to play them and when not to play them. He's a 8 mana for a 7/6 trample. Whenever you would tap a land for a mana, you add 1 mana extra to your mana pool of the same type that land produced. And whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Something I'd like to stress really quickly, because it came up very recently in a game I played with this deck, is I had gotten out a turn 4 Vorniclex thanks to Natural Order, and a player used Damnation to get rid of it, and on his next turn he untapped all of his lands, and we had to remind me, and thankfully the other player knew the ruling on it as well, so we were able to convince him. Because unlike Moto enforces the rules, and that can be a good and bad thing too, and I'll go into my own rant on that someday. But in Cockatrice, the rules are not enforced. It's a lot like tabletop Magic. You just have to know, and you have to talk to the players and make them realize or explain to them how things work, which will also cause people to rage too. But again, I'll talk about that on a later date. Plus the ups and downs of playing on Cockatrice. So anyhow, we had to explain to him that even though Vorniclex was no longer on the field, the lands he had tapped when Vorniclex was in play do not untap during his untap step, which he was not very happy to find that out. But that's how the card works. Alrighty, next up we have Wall of Roots. This is what I literally like to in this deck anyhow with Omnath. This is our green mana battery. If you don't know what green mana battery is, I'll have to see if I can find it. Green mana battery. This is a really old card for you pay 2, tap it, put a charge counter on it, and then at any time you can tap it to remove any number of charge counters to add that much green mana to your mana pool. So it is kind of like that in the sense that we're going to pay 2 mana for Wall of Roots, but then what we're going to do, he's a defender, and then he has put a -0, -1 counter, which is just a bizarre counter, on Wall of Roots, and then you add 1 green mana to your mana pool. Activate this only once each turn. What would seem like his drawback is actually his greatest strength. During each of your opponent's turns with Omnath in play, you just pop a counter off. So by the time it comes back around to you, in a 4-player game, he's going to have already netted you 4 mana. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Ideally, you'll play him, pop 1, next guy's turn, pop another, guy after that, pop another, guy after that, pop another, then back to you. That's 5. You literally have 5 free mana waiting for you on your next turn. Absolute value. Not to mention, if you ever needed him to, he still has 0/5 for 2, so he can block a lot of stuff. Great card. Wickerbrow Elder. This guy used to actually be quite a staple also in EDH back in its earlier days, and he's kind of fallen off since. I shouldn't say since its earlier days, because he really got popularized in the set that he came out with, and which was Shadowmoor. Which was before the Alara blocks. Remember him seeing a lot of play with a lot of the Alara generals that could run green. But anyhow, so what he did is he was 4 mana for a 4/4. Comes into play with 2 -1/-1 counters on him. Then you can pay green to remove a -1/-1 counter to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. If you play him the same turn that you're going to remove both of them out, he's essentially a 6 mana 4/4 that destroys two either artifact or enchantments. So really great card. I mean, just does quite a bit for this. Just very, again, kind of that versatility thing. I mean, he's just got a lot of versatility going for him. Wood Elves. He is interesting. He's a 3 mana 1/1. When Wood Elves comes into play, search your library for a force card, put that card into play, and then shuffle your library. It's the main thing you have to understand here is that it finds a force card, and also that force comes into play untapped. It is also an elf, so it counts for our things that like to count the number of elves we have in play. Woodfall Primus is kind of like Wickerbrow Elder, except much more expensive, but he has the persist mechanic. When he dies, he comes back into play with a -1/-1 counter on him, and he gets to do his come into play effect again. The main difference between him and Wickerbrow Elder is that he has 2 power more, a lot more mana, and he has trample, which is a lot nicer to use. Great card overall, and I know a lot of decks like to have like infinite combo loops with him. This deck unfortunately doesn't do that, but he's just still a great card on his own. And the last creature we have is Yamavan Elder. 3 mana for a 2/1. When he's put into a graveyard from play, you may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library, and then you can pay 2 to sacrifice him to draw a card. Again, this card used to be kind of a staple in EDH. In fact, he came out, I believe, with the first, whenever Wizards kind of took over, they didn't take over, when they fully started endorsing EDH and relabeled it as Commander, the first round of Commander products, I believe, any deck that had green in it had a copy of the Umblin Elder, because he was considered a staple at the time. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the pace here. I just realized how long we've been doing this. Next up we got Exploration. Again, kind of a staple in the format. 1 green enchantment. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Great card, really nice. Gaia's Touch, essentially an exploration, but a little bit better for Omnath in the sense that it says you may put a basic forest from your hand into the battlefield, activate this ability anytime you can cast a sorcery and only once each turn. And then you can sack it to add double green to your mana pool, so you can make Omnath bigger in a pinch. You can use the main reason I like this card with Omnath is that you can dump once you get all the lands dumped out of your hand, you can pretty much sack it and get a use out of it. Whereas Exploration, once you get all the lands out of your hand, you're back to dropping 1 land a turn, and so it's not very useful. Whereas Gaia's Touch, at least you can just go ahead and off it to add 2 more mana to your mana pool, so you're still getting the mana you invested into it back out. Greater Good, probably green's best draw spell. At least in my opinion. 2 colors, 2 green, enchantment, sack a creature, you draw cards equal to the creature's power, and then discard 3 cards. This card is rather silly with Omnath. I mean, Omnath, it's not unheard of for Omnath on average to get to like 20 plus power in a game, which, as a reminder, you only need them at 21 general damage to kill somebody. Hall of Gemstone, this is a nice little secret card that not very many mono decks play. You want to play this in mono green anytime you can. It is Hall of Gemstone, colorless, double green. During each player's upkeep, that player chooses a color. Until end of turn, each mana-producing land produces mana of the chosen color instead of its normal color. This card is amazing. It means during your turn, when you choose green, because all your stuff is green, your opponents can no longer tap for blue to counter your spells. They can no longer tap for white to cast Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshare. This card is amazing. And the thing is too, is it only cares about the lands, so watch out for their mana artifacts that can tap for colors so that they could potentially counterspell. But the main reason it's good for us though is that all that green mana we have floated with Omnath is still green mana when it switches to their turns, so if we have any instants we need to play, we can still play them. Great card. Mana Reflection, 6 mana, basically makes all of our permanents tap for twice that mana. Important to keep in mind with our cards like Gaia's Cradle, all of our elves that tap for double mana, or tap for the number of elves in play, as well as our Raphellos. They all will tap for double as much. So the wording on that is important, because it's not just lands. Survival of the Fittest. Again, this was the card we mentioned earlier with Fauna Shaman. This is the original card. You can do this as many times as you can pay green for and discarding a creature, so very good. Sylvan Library. 2 mana enchantment. This one's a little more confusing. It is 2 mana for an enchantment. At the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, you choose 2 cards in your hand, draw on this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life and put it back on top of your library. If you get this card early game, you pretty much always should be paying 4 to 8 life to be getting as much gas as possible off the top. Because card advantage is king. Like, I can't even stress that enough. Card advantage is king. It's how this game revolves. Utopia Sprawl. Utopia Sprawl, 1 green. Enchants a forest. Whenever it comes into play, you choose a color. Whenever the forest tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of the chosen color reserve pool. You basically use this to name green, and then you're basically using it to tap for green each turn. It's just kind of another 1 mana for 1. It allows you to get a turn 2 Omnath if you have this in your starting hand. Great card. Vernal Bloom. I may actually take this out, mainly because, you know, since green is one of the better colors in the format, forest tapping for an additional green, because it makes everybody's, not just your own. Mana Reflection only matters with your own stuff. This gives everybody stuff, so I may take this out actually, and I might actually replace this with Wild Growth. That's actually an idea. It's a second Utopia Sprawl, essentially. And so that's an idea I'll have to keep back in my mind. Alright, so next up we have our instants. We run 6 instants in this deck, and right now we have Beast Within. This is also fairly, yeah, that's pretty much a staple in green. It's a 3 mana instant, destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 beast creature token onto the battlefield. This is one of the few cards that green has that can actually destroy creatures, so it is rather nice. Court of Calling, 3 mana X, Convoke, search your library for a creature card for mana cost X or less, put it into play, shuffle your library afterwards. This card is amazing. Puts it right into play, so you get come into play effect off the creature card. You can convoke to make it cheaper, although we're going to have tons of mana anyhow, so this just lets us grab whatever the heck we want to grab and put it into play. Very good card. Crop Rotation, 1 green mana. You can, it's an instant. Whenever you play it, you sack a land. Then you search your library for a land card, put that land into play. It's important to remember it puts the land that you search into play untapped. This is great to turn a normal forest into a Gaia's Cradle or a utility land when you need it. Crows and Grip. It is 3 mana, split second, destroy target artifact or enchantment. This is what I like to call the anti-combo card. This card stops combos dead. You target a combo piece, they can't respond, it's gone. You now bought a turn. Nature's Claim. This card is pretty self-explanatory. It's a 1 mana naturalize, but your opponent gains 4 life, which isn't really a big deal, since the majority of the way our commander wins is through commander damage, so life gain is kind of irrelevant. Worldly Tutor. It's 1 green mana, allows us to search our deck for any creature card, put it on. We reveal it, then put it on top of our library. Great card, allows us to grab any of our giant guys. It's just it's a creature tutor. It's a great card. In this deck, we run 31 basic forests. We do not run snow forests, and there's a reason for that. Mainly just in the meta I play in currently here. A lot of snow forests were seeing play, but then people started going into a split mode where they were splitting between normal and normal forests and snow forests to try to take advantage of extra planar lands as much as possible. At this point, I'm just running pure basics, because that way, either way, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, if they make the call or not, I can get benefit or not. The deck has enough ramp as it is, I shouldn't have to base my lands around it. Gaia's Cradle, just amazing card. I shouldn't call it a staple because it's really not. Not enough people have one to run it, but I think it would be a staple if it was a little more commonly available to the populace. It literally is tap, add a green to your mana, pull for each creature you control. Absolutely bonkers card. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. This card just came out in Theros, I believe. Either Theros or Born of the Gods, I can't remember. I want to say it was Theros. This card is amazing. It's kind of a second Gaia's Cradle, kind of, in the sense that you can pay 2 to choose color, you add mana to mana pool equals your devotion to that color. Devotion means how many mana symbols you have on permanents on the field, on your side of the field. So, great card, and with this deck it's obviously going to activate for quite a bit, and as long as, because think about it, it takes 2 mana to activate this, so if you tap 2 lands and this, that's technically 3 mana being tapped, so you need to make it more than 3 to make Nykthos worth it. Strip Mine, just a great utility land, gets rid of pesky things like Maze of Ith and any other type of land that's just making your gameplay miserable. Next up we have our Planeswalkers. We have Garruk the Wildspeaker. 4 mana, he untaps 2 lands, puts 3/3 Beast into play, or gives you the Overrun effect. Great card. Garruk Primal Hunter. He's going to be our other draw spell, and this is probably the second best, if not third best draw spell Green has, mainly because you can play him out for 6 and then pop it, and if you have a huge Omnath, you're going to draw 20 plus cards or so. So for 6 mana draw a lot of cards, definitely a good card. Alright, next up we have Cultivate. Cultivate is going to be a 3 mana, search your library for 2 basic land cards, put one of those into the battlefield, one into your hand, one that goes in the battlefield comes into play tapped. Great ramping spell. It's a copy of Kadama's Reach, which was the only reason this one never got printed is because it has Sorcery Arcane, and the name Kadama is pretty restrictive to the plane of Kamigawa. So, but still great cards. They do the exact same thing, but great cards. Genesis Wave. This allows you to spend some of that mana you've accumulated with Omnath and just basically turn your deck onto the table and turn it sideways. Really, really fun card. Green Sun Zenith. This is a wombo combo with that Dryad Arbor we had mentioned earlier. You can literally pay 1 green, leave X as 0, find the Dryad, put it into play, and pass the turn. So it's essentially a 1 mana ramp spell. If you need to grab any other creature though, it can also do that as well. But always keep the Druid or the Dryad combo in mind. Harmonize. This is Green's Concentrate. It's good because it's in green. Green doesn't get a whole lot of draw, so it's pretty much a shoe-in for now. We already talked about Kadama's Reach. National Order. This is what allows us to have some pretty crazy plays with those extra mana boosters like Elvish Spirit Guide and Lotus Petal. We can use these and also with a little mana dork like an 8/1 for 1/1 that tap for green mana. We can accelerate into a natural order, thus piling out a Vorniclex on turn like 2 or 3, or 3 or 4 I should say, turn 3 or 4, as well as a Woodfall, or not Woodfall Prime. Well, Woodfall Prime wouldn't be bad, but I'm thinking of Terrastodon. After that we have Nature's Lore, 2 mana, sorcery, search your library for any force card, put it into play, then shuffle. This is great because it's puts it right into play, doesn't tap it. It grabs a forest. A lot of people like running these in 2-color decks because they allow you to grab your shock lands into play untapped. Although you still have to pay the 2 life with your shock lands to get them into play untapped. Just letting you guys know. Primal Command. This is a great card in the sense that it has a lot of modes. When we were talking about versatility earlier, this is a card that has versatility. It has 5 mana, choose 2, target player gains 7 life, put a non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library, target player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. Search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into the battlefield, or put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. The reason this card is amazing is the middle 2 effects, the putting a non-creature on top of someone's library and then shuffling their graveyard in, is a nice way to tuck something. A lot of these new gods that came out in Theros are enchantments, so you, especially if they're not activated, they're considered a non-creature permanent. So you can actually put them on top of the library and then shuffle them back in. It seems mean, but that's what they get when they get to run a god. That's an indestructible, fairly costed card. Great card though, just because all the modes can matter at different points in the game. I mean, searching for a creature is never bad, and gaining 7 life is arguably probably the worst mode this card has, but it still can be relevant. Regrowth, this is the card we had talked about earlier, being as Eternal Witness being a body copy of, or a body of. And Regrowth is just that 2 mana, brings a card back from your grass. It's got that cute little pine growing up out of the ground. He's regrowing. Search for Tomorrows. This card is great because you can go turn 1 and suspend it for 2, which means on turn 3 you'll have 4 mana, which isn't completely horrible, but it means you can start floating mana with Omnath on the turn he comes out, which is kind of nice. Or for 3 mana you can just play it and it gets the basic land. Again, the reason this card gets played is because the basic land it grabs, it puts it into play untapped. This is something to remember because most of the cards in this deck, when they grab lands, they try to grab them and put them into play untapped. Skyshroud Claim. Now this is a commander staple. It's 4 mana, sorcery, search your library for 2 forest cards, put them into play, then shuffle your library. Again, these 2 forests that come into play are untapped, and so essentially this card basically costs you 2 mana as long as you have 4, if you want to think of it that way. Sylvan Scrying. This is a great card, allows us to grab any of our utility lands. It doesn't put them into play, it does put them to our hand, so if you want to cast this and then be able to drop the land in the same turn, just be aware of that. So that way you can grab that and then grab your Gaia's Cradle or your Strip Mine or your Nykthos. Tooth and Nail. A lot of people cry about this card being broken as crap, because it is broken as crap. Basically you're almost always going to pay this for 9, search your deck out for 2 creatures, and then you put them directly into play. Incredible value. And that's it. That's the whole entirety of the Omnath deck. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll see you guys around next time on Commanding the Zones. Thank you.